Well, after 22 years at Virginia, Brian O'Connor shocked the college baseball world. Why now? Why Mississippi State? And what sealed the deal? In his first comments as head coach, he opens up about legacy, loyalty, and what made Starkville impossible to turn down.
You are Locked On Mississippi State, your daily podcast on the Mississippi State Bulldogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Go to FanDuel.com. I'm Jaron, Spor, national college football writer at Athlon Sports. That's Landon McBride. We have a packed show for you today. We're going to dive into Brian O'Connor's comments after being named head coach at Mississippi State. Big press conference last week. I looked at it the other day, so it should still be there, but it's on ESPN Plus. If you missed it, you can go back and watch it. Also, there's several YouTube links for it as well, so you can watch that. Also, he got a massive contract. We're going to dive into his contract and what that means to how committed Mississippi State is to baseball moving forward. And Diamond Dogs got some more good news. Some more players announced they are returning. We'll break that down and what that means for next season. One of them was a massive one. Both of them were very good, but one of them was a massive one to stay. But let's dive into Brian O'Connor's comments. Obviously, he gave a lot of different quotes because it was a long press conference. But I thought the most interesting one was when he talked about his time to leave or his decision to leave Virginia, because like we said, 22 years at Virginia. And he talked about, I'm not going to read his whole excerpt because it's very long, but he talked about how, he never really thought about that he was going to leave. He loved it, loved being there. But it had to be the right partnership. And that was like the most important thing to him.
Right.
And he said, he talked about how incredibly special Starkville was. He said the program is supported at the highest level, right? And then he said, and the history and tradition that's behind this program also played a big part. But he also said Zach Selmon was a major part in that. And, we've heard about someone being criticized heavily, and Brian O'Connor saying right off the bat that was a big decision in him jumping ship over here. But I mean, he basically came out and said what we've thought, which is Virginia wasn't as committed to baseball as Mississippi State. And that's not a shot at Virginia. Right. We've talked about why a lot of schools probably aren't going to be committed. And tomorrow we're going to talk about the House settlement. So don't miss that. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that and the cap that's going to be put on. And probably even more teams aren't going to be committed to baseball going forward. But Mississippi State is, and that played a big role.
Yeah, the thing that really jumped out to me that also illustrates that point is that as soon as he walked to the podium, he just said, wow. When you have a guy who has been coaching for 2 decades, won titles, and he is wowed by the stadium and the response he gets at an opening press conference, I mean, that speaks to the fan base and the type of program that's here that he's taking over. And so for that to be his initial reaction, that really shows just how committed, school showed they're committed by the amount of money they gave him and the NIL and all that. That shows how committed the fans are to baseball, is that you shock a man who's seen it all.
Right. Yeah. And that just, that should make you feel good, though, reading that comment or listening to that comment if you read or if you were able to watch the broadcast, and just show where the program is headed in terms of the support behind it. And that should, again, make you feel really good, because that was something like during the season we saw that was questioned a lot. Even in our comments was questioned about how committed Mississippi State is to NIL and to athletics in general. And he just flat out came out and said that that's just not the case. Like, they are obviously fully committed. I read a deal the other day. I believe it might have been from the 24/7 sports site. I can't remember if it was from them. I think it was from them. And they talked about how they're also more committed in football than they've ever been. So obviously this is something that they recognized was an issue and they're pushing forward. And that's Zach Selmon again. And for Zach Selmon to be in year 3 as an athletic director, to be able to pitch a vision to a coach like that,
Mm-hmm.
and that coach buys into it off the bat, like that should also make you feel really good as a Mississippi State fan.
Yeah, it should, and it speaks to what Zach Selmon can do. Because I mean, it's one thing to pitch it to Levy, who's getting a first-time head coach. It's another thing to convince a guy to leave somewhere that he thought he wasn't, that he said himself he was not planning to leave.
Right.
I mean, that's huge to him, and it gets you excited for what that vision is. Because obviously, we're getting what they. Yeah, I don't want to say what they want us to know, but the part they can say publicly without really going into the details. And so if that is what they're willing to share, that's very exciting. And O'Connor's quote about when you have relationships and you have work and you have development, that leaves one thing: winning. And that's what we've talked a lot about with this team is these are very good players that kind of seem to hit a certain point and then didn't continue to develop, or didn't seem to develop too much once they got here. But some of them did. If you get a whole team that continues to develop, and then you get the guys that he's going to recruit with this NIL and this new vision and these new facilities, like this is shaping up to be a dynasty.
Yeah, it definitely is. And he also talked about the Zach Selmon part in more depth and kind of like when Selmon first kind of pitched the history, the tradition, and just everything that goes into it, and also pitched his vision going forward. He was like, I was ready to commit to that. But he said, he told Zach, he said, I just need a little bit more time. And he said, after they got done talking, that's when he was like, all right, I this is all about my family first and foremost. And so he sat down with his family on the couch and he was like, all right, are y'all behind this? Are y'all on board? And they smiled and they said, yes, we are. And he said, right then I knew like this was it. This was the right opportunity. I said that if the right opportunity came up, and to leave Virginia, then I would do that. This was that opportunity. The family was on board. I liked the vision and so on and so forth. And then he said he called Zach shortly after that and agreed to it. And he said then it took a little while to obviously finalize everything that it has to get approved and so on and so forth, the contracts and stuff. But overall, yeah, I mean, that was the biggest takeaway. There's obviously a lot of other ones. He thanked Virginia for his time there, which I know a lot of Virginia fans were upset that he hadn't thanked them. And
did that for a while. This was not just a thank you.
Right.
I mean, it showed that he deeply cared about that place, that he poured 2 decades of himself into it. So,
I truly believe if they would have shown the backing towards the baseball program like he wanted, or at least close to what he wanted, and they fulfilled some promises that might have been out there that have been rumored to have been out there that weren't kept, I don't know if he leaves. I think he's still there.
Yeah, I do too. And it's one of those things where I think it's going to work out well. I mean, not going to work out well for Virginia in that they lost a great coach. But I mean, it was time to move on. If it had gotten to that point, then that's when you want to move on from a coach before it does get ugly. And you can still kind of be like, thank you for what you did here. This hasn't got ugly yet. And he's thanking them. And it's just good to see that he did have that kind of ties, because I think having that kind of ties to your community is very important, especially with a program like we have here at Mississippi State. Having that kind of dedication is huge, on a personal level, not just on-field success.
Yeah, and another thing, the family atmosphere, I want to talk about that a little bit, just because he mentioned getting his family on board, and they didn't hesitate. They were on board. And, that's something we have seen a lot of recruits and stuff mention about the football program, but that all is connected. Mississippi State in general as a school is they have this family atmosphere, and that's massive. Obviously to a big time coach, it's obviously massive to recruits. Now you can have the family atmosphere, but if you don't have the results on the field, you don't have the NIL, that might not matter as much, because there's a lot of teams that have a family atmosphere that are offering that stuff. And so we'll see what happens going forward. But I think also all the Virginia players that entered the portal that immediately signed with Mississippi State, I think tells you a lot about him as a coach, Brian O'Connor, because we do see sometimes where a coach kind of unexpectedly leaves and the players are like, well, screw you, I'm not going with you. Like you screwed us over. And that wasn't the case at all. These guys entered, and we thought Valencius Tomas was going to get a ton of recognition from a lot of schools, and he probably got a lot of people that wanted to get after him. And he was quick in making that decision to go to Mississippi State. It didn't take long. And we've mentioned Aiden Teal and James Nunnally, like all these guys that it was like, there's going to be a lot of programs after these guys. Mississippi State's in the driver's seat. Hopefully they can finish, but there's going to be a lot of guys out there. Nah, it was quick. They didn't take these visits. And, Henry Ford's the only one that's taking visits. But we said from the start, from Tennessee, Tennessee's a great program. We understand he's taking some time. And he might even go to the draft still. Yeah. We don't know all.
Yeah, even if he commits somewhere, he might not ever play there. So,
yeah, exactly.
So that's one of those things. But yeah, the family part's huge. He talked about it a lot. And I do think a lot of schools claim family. Yeah, everyone. Right. Oh, we're family. Right. Oh, we're family. But there's really, I would say, only a handful that are truly like that. Like it feels different when you're on campus. Even if you're not really a part of that family, you can feel it at a handful of campuses that it is different. And one of them you feel when you go to Starkville.
Yeah. And that's always great. And that hopefully brings in more recruits and so on and so forth. And maybe you get some more of those Virginia transfers that are still out there.
That family coming down south.
Like Ford, Becker is another one that, hopefully you can get on board. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, great start by getting the coach. A lot of great things said in that statement. So we'll see what happens there going forward. All right, coming up next, another part of the commitment was the contract that Brian O'Connor got, because he might have liked the opportunity to come to Mississippi State. But if he didn't get the contract at least somewhat where he wanted, he probably isn't coming still. So we're going to talk about that and how that shows Mississippi State's how dedicated they are to this NIL approach. That's going to come up next. Well, the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. One bet you could probably place right off the start. Actually, if you listen to Indiana Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle, you can put it off the start, because he said you can pencil Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in for, I think, 34 points as soon as he gets off the bus. So take Rick Carlisle's word for it, because he said it. So put a money in on the over on his points, as long as it's not like 50 points or something like that is the over. But yeah, put in the over on his, because he was giving you a free bet right there. Also, if you're watching the game and, this game 2 ended, Sunday night, like Aaron Wiggins was having a big game for Oklahoma City. So maybe you want to put a parlay in for him. Obi Toppin had a big game for the Pacers in game 1. So while that game's going, maybe you're putting in an over on his stuff. Tyrese Halliburton was struggling last game in game 2. So maybe you put an under on some of his stuff. Just things like that going forward. You're able to do that during the game. That's what makes FanDuel so great. If you're new to FanDuel, listen up. It's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so Brian O'Connor also got a massive contract to come to Mississippi State. It is reported that it's a 4-year deal worth an average of $2.9 million annually. This will make him the second highest paid coach in the SEC, only behind Tennessee's Tony Vitello, and he makes $3.25 million. So just for kind of reference, Chris Lemonis was making about $1.55 million, or he's going to make $1.55 million more than Lemonis. Lemonis made $1.35 million in the last year of his deal. And I believe that was like 8th or 9th in the conference, despite winning a national championship and despite being in a big-time conference, which that was a lot of criticism towards Mississippi State, that they're not paying coaches. Well, they paid for this one.
Yeah, they did. They paid big time. But again, we've mentioned it. If you're going to get someone with his resume to leave a school he's not planning to leave, you have to shell out the money. And they did. I actually assumed he was going to end up being the highest paid coach, just because that's how these things tend to work when you have someone with a good resume. But, so I guess they got him at a little bit of a discount. There are a lot of incentives in this, like $50,000 for winning an SEC regular season title or the SEC tournament, $50,000 if he's named SEC Coach of the Year or National Coach of the Year, $300,000 if they win a national title. So, I mean, there's a lot of incentives. So on top of just that, 2.9 commitment, they're making commitment to a lot of possible more money on top of that with all of those. If he has the success that they expect to have, when you pay someone like that, you bring someone like that in here, you're pretty much expecting to pay out the majority of those incentives.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, it's another example of showing how committed they are to baseball. And for those out there that when we used to talk about, hey, you really can't be fully committed to baseball, you have to be with football. And people are like, no, this is Mississippi State. We're a baseball school. We have to be committed to baseball. And no matter all the numbers we gave you that showed why business-wise that wasn't smart, y'all still stuck to that stance. Y'all have to be ecstatic about what's going on. But we have to bring up that side. And Landon and I talked about it earlier today. He sent me some nuggets. So I won't steal all those stats because I'll let you kind of go through them. But one of the big things that was talked about in the article that you read, I believe it was from the Clarion Ledger, was they have lost $3.15 million just last year in baseball, in 2024 in baseball. So it's not a sport that's making them money, yet they're still so committed to it.
Yeah, they lost over $3 million last year, and since 2011, an average of $1 million lost per year. Which, I mean, the reason the number is a little bit higher this last year is, when we've talked about it before, they're operating at a known loss of about $7 million across all athletics. So that's why this last year was a little bit higher than past. But that is, they're averaging almost 11,000 fans per game, which is by far the most in sports. Like, no one else is bringing that kind of crowd to your average baseball game. And then you have their title, all those World Series appearances, all the people that are showing up for press conferences to announce baseball coaches. You're still losing $1 million a year, which, yes, you have to be committed to baseball. I mean, your fans are telling you have to be.
Right.
But you can't go all in because you weren't. You were doing great, but not all in, and you still can even break even. So you can't go all in on it because then you'll go bankrupt.
And that's why the house settlement is so interesting. And again, we'll dive into it more tomorrow, but just to kind of give a little nugget, 20 to 25 million is the projected cap for all sports, not football, not basketball, all sports. And you now have to figure out where you're going to be spending that money. If you're looking at it from a business sense, it needs to be on football and men's basketball. Those are the two that make the most money. I'm talking about all schools in general. Those two make the most money. Football, obviously, the highest one.
By far.
And that's why I think you're going to see a lot of teams put 18 million of their NIL into those sports because they know to compete, they got to do that. And you might have some that are like, hey, I'm sorry, other sports, but we're putting all 20 on football or whatever it is. Like, you might see that start happening because they know money-wise that's going to make them the most money. So that's going to be interesting to see what Mississippi State does because baseball is probably their most popular sport in terms of what the fan base loves the most. But football is the moneymaker. Men's basketball is then next. And what actually wasn't it? Was it women's basketball or was it softball? Was the only other one that made money? It was one of those two.
Softball, I don't think either of them made money, but it was like they lost like $100 or something. Like they were right there.
They almost broke even. I thought there was one that made like $1 million.
I think it was softball. Maybe it made a tiny bit. It was right around.
Yeah, it was very little. And so what are you going to do going forward? That's going to be the interesting thing with this house settlement. Again, we'll get into more of the details tomorrow. But that's kind of what I'm curious to see. But kind of going back to Brian O'Connor's contract, I mean, he was making $1.4 million annually on average through 2031 with the contract he was just under at Virginia. And so you took him from 1.4 to 2.9. I mean, you over doubled his salary. And yeah, and then on top of that, his buyout was $500,000 according to USA Today. And so obviously that's something that Mississippi State will have to pay out. But I mean, you went all in for this coach, and then the house settlement dropped him. Now we'll see what all they're going to do player-wise, because making those agreements, I don't think that cap will go in this year. We'll see. It's just so late in the process for them to be able to do that. So it probably goes into next year. Well, that's going to affect how you operate this year, because are you going to go sign a bunch of older guys so you know they're off the books, as the pros talk about it, off the cap books for next year, versus signing these other guys, and then next year being like, oh shoot, we've put $10 million on 5 guys, we got to ask them for a reduction, and they're like, nope, we're gone. Like,
We're going to see
you
the
never know.
introduction of the deferred contract in college sports, where you sign like a $20 million deal, but only $500,000 you get while you're actually in school, and so they just roll it out as they hope the cap goes up.
Yeah. So we'll see what ends up happening with that going forward. But all right, coming up next, 2 more Diamond Dogs said they are returning to school. Who are they, and how big of an impact that will be heading into next year? That's coming up. Well, thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, so Mississippi State got some more good news. That happened on Sunday night. Bryce Chance, who's I believe a redshirt sophomore outfielder, or he's listed as a sophomore outfielder, but he's definitely been there 3 years, so I think it should have said redshirt. But regardless,
at this point, I'm trying to figure out college eligibility.
Again, they need to go to how many eligibility years do you have left? Don't tell me if he's a freshman, sophomore. Just tell me that stuff. But anyways, he said he's coming back. And then Ben Davis, who was arguably the best reliever they had, even started a game last year against in the regional. I believe that was the first game against Northeastern, and pitched really well in that one. You got him to come back as well.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, Ben Davis, probably the bigger one of those two, which we spent a lot of time talking about their pitching that they could have. I mean, McPherson's back, Evans back. They got Valencius, I forget which one, Tomas. He's back. You got Ben Davis back. There's still a chance Pico could come back. I mean, this pitching staff is starting to shape up to be pretty good. So that's huge. And then Bryce Chance, one of your everyday outfielders. I think he played pretty much every day. I mean, I'm sure he missed a couple games here and there. But I mean, based off of his at-bat numbers, I'm not going to go through and figure out which games he missed, but pretty much every day. With all the outfielders they're adding, I guess some of these guys are going to play infield somewhere. Because, I mean,
some of them are going to have to.
4 transfers that were batters, 3 of them were like primary outfielders, and one was their secondary position. So it's it'll be interesting to see where they get the at-bats to fall. But I mean, hey, it's always good to have a guy who, gave you a .332 batting average on the team.
Yeah. And so Chance played in 58 out of 59 games. And he started 56.
So we got a day off. That was close.
So there was one game he didn't play. He started 56 of them. So there was 3 games he didn't start. But in his career, he has a .312 average. Last year was a .332 average. So really solid at the plate. He had 4 home runs, 43 RBI. So he's not, you obviously know watching him, he's not a big home run guy, but he's a guy that he gets on base, as they say on Moneyball. There we go, Moneyball. And then Ben Davis had a .377 ERA, went 4-2 as win-loss record. But again, he was more of a reserve most of the season, but he started in that game against Northeastern, and I believe it was the first game against Northeastern when they won like 11-2 or whatever like that, whatever it was. But he pitched really good in that game, and you obviously love having those guys back on the team, more experience, and guys that know the culture of the town and obviously Justin Parker probably played a huge part, and especially Ben Davis staying. Played a part in Bryce Chance staying as well.
Yeah, it's big. And Ben Davis, I mean, I know he had that one hiccup kind of late in the year, but he did his best pitching was down the stretch. So maybe something kind of turned a corner there, and he's poised for a big next year. And that's something you kind of see a lot with pitchers. They come in, they start as relievers, and then slowly become starters. So maybe that's what we see for him next year, is he kind of morphs into being one of your 3 starters that you can rely on next year, which he showed he has the stuff to do that. We'll see if he can continue to develop.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see if we get any more announcements of players coming back or players transferring in. Maybe
come on, Henry Ford.
Yeah, I was about to say maybe some Henry Ford news, something like that would be great. But we'll see moving forward. But thanks for making Locked On Mississippi State your first listen today. For your second listen, check out The Portal Show, Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Jaron. Check out my work over on Athlon Sports. That's Landon. Follow us, Locked On Mississippi State. We're on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Post daily videos Monday through Friday, so check those out. We also put a comment in the box below on the YouTube comments. We love those responses. We interact with some people even on yesterday's video. We try to interact with everyone that we can. And then we also post a poll, a separate question, but it's in poll form on YouTube as well. We love your feedback on that and kind of getting this stuff on that. Maybe on each episode, I'll read the results from the last poll. That'd be fun. Maybe I'll start doing that. Yeah, it could be interesting. But all right, until next time, Hail State.
Hail State.